All right, when taking the pneumatic diagram and we want to add the PLC cards and we want to add the rung in the middle and the electronics to control our solenoids of this impulse valve for the directional control valve. We want to make sure that we have the right directional control valve with 2 solenoids and that we can change each input of the directional control valve to be what we need. So now that we've got it set as the solenoids, we come over here to the electrical control and we're going to use the JIC standards and we're going to pull in some PLC cards here. The input card we're going to put here on the left, and then the output card we're going to put on the right with a space in the middle for us. We want to add power to the input and output cards, and this is what you would need to do in most PLC cabinets, is you would need to provide a low voltage power source to the input and output cards that you're using. Once you have those set up, make sure the 0 is connected to the common, and then we're going to set up our electronics here from the electrical control JIC standard. Look at our diagram. We want a push button, 2 separate push buttons that are momentary push buttons on the left side. So we're going to come over here to our switches and normally open push button, and we can drag and drop it in to connect it there, give it its name, push button 1, and then we can pull it over to where we want it in the diagram. We add our second, and the reason we're connecting it to N0 and then to N2 is really just to give yourself some space, because we don't have a whole lot of devices in here, so we have room to spread it out a little bit. And we can put the name below if we want to, and then we connect both of these to the power source, and that looks like it's correct on the input side. We also want to add to the right side these solenoids, our output components, solenoid DC-AC on the right side. And now this is a transmitter in Automation Studio, so it's going to, when this receives power, it's going to send that signal saying that I have power to somewhere else on your diagram. We're going to name this solenoid 1 for exercise 1. And then we're going to connect it to the power source there. And then we're going to add a second one on out 2. We're going to call it solenoid 2.ex1 for exercise 1. And connect it also to the power. We have the ground connected. Okay, now we're going to add the rung in the middle and the PLC logic. So we're going to go down to the ladder for Allen Bradley PLC and ladder for AV PLC, and that's the library we're going to use for these exercises. So we're going to pull in the rung, set it in the middle. We can make it smaller. We don't have a lot of components in the center here, so we can keep it as a smaller rung here. Then we want to go through and add our contacts and our coils. So we have this under the contacts, we have examine if opened and examine if closed. We have in our diagram here 2 examine if closed components. So we're going to place those in here. And then we're going to add our coils. We have output energized OTE coils, 1 on this rung. And this is a transmitter, so that when this coil receives a signal, it's going to want to communicate somewhere inside or to the output card on the outside. It wants to cause an action to happen. And so we're going to name this something that we can find later. And so we'll name it out 0.ex1, because that's what we want to connect it to. And then when we bring in the second one, we're going to name it out MET230L.ex1 so we can find it later. Then we're going to connect these lines here. And now we match what we want on the right side. And we need to make all the connections now. We start here with our control interface, which is the push buttons. They're going to send a signal to the input card. We need to make the connection now from the input card to these components inside the PLC. Then they're going to cause power to happen on these coils. And we need to make the connection between what the coils, how they're connected to the output card. And then once the output card receives power, it's going to activate these solenoids. But then the solenoids need to be connected to something in our actual pneumatic circuit. So let's do that one at a time. We'll first start with the input card, and we need to connect. The input card is transmitting in0, in1, in2. Those are out for grabs, and these examine if closed need to reach out and be connected to them. So if we have multiple input cards inside a project, so if we have multiple diagrams here, add a come in here and do new standard diagram into the project default. We have a second diagram and we have another PLC card in here. Let's do an in and an out. Okay, these are called E1-2 or E1_2 and E2_2. So we have these in here. Now in0 through in7 are also being transmitted into our program. So back here, when I need to make this connection to my input card, I need to be able to find it in this output examine if closed contact. So when I double click on it and I'm searching for in0, there's two choices. And those two choices because I have multiple input cards in my program here. So what I need to do first is I need to open up the card, and I have all my slots here to be connected. Well, I need to rename this one. So I'm going to rename it, but I'm not going to use a period this time. I'm going to use an underscore. If I use a period, when there's a connection made, it'll only use the name after the period. And so EX1 will be displayed on all of the examine if closed contacts. So I want to use an underscore so that in0 is also displayed. And I need to make sure I hit enter. And I was also wanting to use input 2 here, so I'm going to do the same thing. Exercise 1 is the input 0 slot for exercise 1, input 0 slot, 2 slot for exercise 1. And now that I have those in there, I can then go to my contact here, and I can see in my search that I now have one that's I set for exercise 1. So I'm going to double click on it. And now it has the name here, E1_1, which comes from the PLC card that I'm connecting. Then it has this in0_ex1. If I would have titled it in0.ex1 with a period there, then all you would see is E1_1 period ex1, and that gets confusing when you have multiple contacts. So I have that contact titled and shown. I'm going to go to the next one, and I want in2. And again, there's 2 because there's multiple cards. So I have it labeled so that I can find it. All right, so now my connection is made across this point. And I can know that if I simulate it and I hit this push button, this green shows up on the in0, and this green shows up on the contact here. So I know it made a connection. Now I have a green on the output, but I do not have a green yet on the output card because it is not connected. So that's helps me find where I'm missing a connection. And now that I have the two input cards connected, I need to connect the output card. So for this signal to connect, I'm creating an alias or a naming on the output coils here. Then I need to find them on the output card. Okay, so this gets a little tricky. When I search for the outputs, I see the two names that I created, out 0 and out 1. I need to make sure that I'm selected. I'm selecting output 0 spot before I select this output 0 alias to connect it to. But once I make that connection, the output coil is going to change names to match the output card. So if I double click, you'll see output 0.ex1 turn to output 0. Now the connection has been made to the correct component and the title was changed. So something that would help me is on every diagram here, it's going to do the same thing, and the outputs will all have the same title because there's no difference when you pull in a new card. These will all be titled the same. So what I can do is output 2, I can add a Ex1 here to the name. Well, maybe I can't. And I want to make sure I'm on this output 2 and I select output 2 there. Now let's see if I can name those. I cannot change the name like I could on the input card. So I just have to make sure that I change the name first on the output coil. Then I find it when I'm naming and connecting through the output card. And that will guarantee that I have it connected correctly. Okay, so now I have the connection made from input to examine if closed contacts here. I have the connection made from my output to my output card. And again, I can check that. I try pushing the button. I get green across this connection. I get green across this connection. Now I have a solenoid 1 that's receiving power. Last connection I need to make is from this solenoid up to the actual solenoid. So if I double click on the control valve, I have two question marks here, but there's no easy way to tell which one is the left side and which one is the right side. What I can do is go up in this diagram and I can actually click on the left side, which I want to be solenoid 1. Then I can come over here and I only have one question mark because that's the one spot where I'm available to connect. And I can see solenoid1.ex1 from my electronics. Then I can click on the right side and I can see solenoid 2 to make that connection. If I click in the middle, then I can get rid of that selection on which side, and I can see that 2 was in front of 1, and that was the left side and the right side. Now I should have everything connected. I can simulate it and make sure that it extends or retracts like it should. Everything looks like it's working just fine.